Salvete omnes. This is Magister Hodges, and today I'm just going to go over, this is just a video walkthrough of your final writing project, which is to create your own Greek or Roman god or goddess and write a short children's story about them. So in this video, I'm just going to kind of go over what's needed, what's necessary. You have a lot of freedom of a lot of creative freedom on this. And I'm just going to show you where to find everything and show you how everything works. And hopefully all makes sense. As always, if you have questions, please message me on It's Learning. And yeah, so let's go. So from It's Learning, you're going to see the first step due by the end of the virtual week. Next week for EOCs is to check out this first assignment right here, New Deity Children's Story Intro and Brainstorming. And basically in here, you're going to find the assignment sheet, and on your screen, it'll probably be more up here in the right corner. You're going to see a brainstorming sheet. So I just want to open up this assignment sheet. This has all the information and scoring criteria and stuff like that. So let's start from there, and then I'll show you how all the assignments. All right. So while unearthing newly discovered ruins of a small Greek village, archaeologists are startled to discover ancient texts detailing an unheard of deity. It's the framing here. You guys are going to create a Greco-Roman god or goddess in the style of the passages that we've read, meaning like it doesn't have to be hyper advanced Latin. That's kind of the children's book side of this. By the end of Latin 2, you're roughly supposed to be the equivalent of like a Roman 4, 5, or 6-year-old. And if you're doing really, really well, then you're probably like the equivalent of a Roman 8-year-old. So when I say children's book, it doesn't necessarily mean content. Doesn't have to be totally, all happiness and rainbows, because Greek mythology is not that. But I'm meaning more like it's okay to be simplistic in your grammar. I really want you guys to try and focus on the things that you know. And for a lot of you, FVA and my Lambert students, you probably haven't had a lot of opportunity to write something freely. So I know we try and do it in class, but even still, it's just something we don't practice enough. So I'm not looking for total perfection here. I'm looking for your best effort. I do have some requirements on here, and then I'll show you how to check them out. So, all right. So what your story needs is your god or goddess. You need to come up with one that is has a Greco-Roman name. So it can't be Steve, but Stephanos is fine. They need an origin story, a supernatural origin story. We know that Athena came out of Saturn's head. We know that Dionysus was carried to term as a baby in Jupiter's thigh. So they all have really weird origins, or they're the sons of another god and goddess or something. So come with an interesting origin for them. They need a unique ruling aspect, meaning like what are they the god or goddess of? And the one requirement here is it can't be something that's already taken by a Roman god or goddess. So like, you can't be the god of the sea because that's Neptune. And so I would say, if you come up with some ideas, go and see if there's already a Roman god or goddess for them. And if not, that's okay. Sometimes you can just change it a little bit. Sometimes make it a little bit more specific. My favorite example is a couple of years ago, a girl asked me if she could do the goddess of transportation. And I said, well, that's Hermes or Mercury. He's the god of transportation. And then we're like, well, what about public transportation? And that's fine because public transportation didn't really exist then, right? So it was made her the goddess of public transportation. Her name was Marta, and her special power was to send rats after you. And that's totally fine. That is how we do it. So like I said, I encourage you to be creative here, kind of forcing you to be by come up with a god or goddess that there isn't one for. Most deities have special superhuman powers or items. So what would be their special superhuman power? What do they look like? They should kind of like befit their character, right? Like when you think of Mars, you think of a guy like really like big and strong and, war. Whereas obviously Venus, goddess of beauty, is considered the most beautiful goddess, so on and so forth. And lastly, some type of symbol. Jupiter, for example, symbolized by an eagle, Hera, a peacock. Sometimes an animal symbol, Neptune has his trident, things like that. Once you've created your deity, you'll then write an original children's short story featuring your deity. The story should be somewhere between 15 to 20 sentences using grammar that you know and what we've learned. Your story can be about the origins of your god or goddess or a particular conflict they face. I'm really encouraging the origin story. I think that's a nice, simple prompt. Each page should be about 1 to 3 sentences. That's another aspect of a children's story. You don't put a lot of text on one page. Should be accompanied by some type of illustration or a picture. If you're an artistic person and you like hand drawing, you are welcome to hand draw this, take pictures, scan it in. Or if you're not, getting different images online and kind of putting them together in a creative way. I'm not, obviously this isn't an art class, so I'm not judging you based off the quality of your art, but I am really looking for the pictures to reinforce the meaning on the page. In the stories we read, I have a feeling that a lot of you, if you read something, you're not totally sure what's going on, probably looking at the pictures on the pages of the Roman novella or the Latin novellas we've been reading. So you just want to make sure your pictures clearly illustrate what's going on in the scene. And any extra words, like you're going to have to look up a lot of words for this. I'm hoping that you guys stay within the bounds of what we've learned, but for a lot of people, for a lot of gods and goddesses, there may be some specialized vocabulary things you have to look up. If it's something you have to look up, then I'd like for you to do a parenthetical gloss for those words, meaning that like next to the Latin word, you will put the English meaning, kind of like this example right here. It says, puer parus accipiterem calerem videt. The small boy sees the fast hawk. And so like hawk's kind of specialized. We don't learn that word. So you would put hawk next to it in parentheses. It's just to make it more readable. The ideal outcome here is that you create something that with little editing by me, I could turn around and use in like Latin 1 next year. So the children's book can be neatly handwritten and illustrated on paper or typed and illustrated in Google Slides. If you have another way you want to do it, that's fine. The major due dates by the end of the virtual week, next Friday, May 6th. I would like your brainstorm, storyline, and new vocabulary activity done. I'll go over that in a minute. A week later, I'm asking you to try and submit a first draft of the Latin story for feedback. I would love as many as I can get. I will go over it and try and help you clean it up or give you some ideas if I can. And then Wednesday, May 18th, final draft is due. So those are the major due dates. Here's how it's going to be scored. We have our proficiency rating up here, which is a very general overview of what you do. Our goal for Latin 2 is for you to be writing an intermediate low by the end of the year. And I can write briefly about most familiar topics and present information using a series of properly phrased simple sentences. So we're not looking for anything crazy. However, there are some things I would like you to try and include, typically, namely things that we've gone over this year. So one part of your grade is this box 1. You'll see it can be 60, 70, 80, 90, or 95 up here. I'm going to put that score right here. And then I'm going to do this kind of 1-point rubric. Here are the 9 language structures I want you guys to include. I would like for you guys to have at least one active verb that is present and an active verb, not present tense, meaning like it is present, like there's an active verb in this story. It's conjugated correctly. Passive verbs, present, conjugated correctly. Proper use of nominative and accusative nouns. Those 3 red ones, these are considered the most simple things that we do. These, I definitely want to see these. The dative in the green, these are kind of a little bit more complicated. Dative and genitive nouns are present and used correctly. Ablative nouns are present and used correctly. And purpose clause are present and used correctly. Purpose clause being those things that have ut, and then the next clause ends with a subjunctive verb. I'll have links to how you do all of these to help you review. Those are considered the mid-level things. And then lastly, the most difficult things, the most complex things that I would like for you to try and add, participles and adjectives. Participles are the most recent thing we went over that we did the video on, carrying pans, wearing pants. Hopefully that makes sense. Relative clauses, those are those clauses that start with qui, quae, or quod, just basically giving more detail about whatever it's referring to. And then lastly, indirect statements, which is something we kind of went over pretty early in the year for something so complicated. Indirect statements are basically when you say something indirectly, like Martin says that he needs to go home. And I will link you back to some information on how those work in Latin. So for each thing of these that are present on there and consistently correct. I'll mark a 1 on here. This is 9 total points, and I will put a value of 1 through 9. If you get all 9, then I will make that 10. Plus 10, I'll give you a bonus point if you do all 9 correctly. And so you can get a max of a 95 up here and a 10 down here. So you're looking at a maximum score of 105. Lastly, in your story, I would like for you to underline or highlight any of these target structures that you would like for me to look at. If you use them multiple times, you only have to underline 1. Okay. All right. So for the language structures themselves, I went down. Here's the list of the things that are required. And I tried my best here to make a quick reference that would show you how to set these sentences up. I'm afraid it might be a little bit more confusing. So if you're looking over this, you don't find it helpful, you can ignore it, but I'll just explain what we're looking for here. So like, for example, for the, like for passive verbs, present and conjugated correctly. A sentence that has a passive verb in it and it's being used correctly will typically start with a nominative noun, or it could be I or you or we or y'all. Then in the middle, you'll probably have the word ob or ah followed by an ablative, the ablative case of a noun, meaning by that person. And then you'll have the passive form of the verb, which means like is verb. So like that would come out to mean like the nominative is verbed by the ablative. And that's kind of what this is. So what you see over here is how you put it together in Latin. And then over on this side is kind of showing you what each part of that sentence would look like when we make it English. I hope this helps. Like I said, if it doesn't, feel free to ignore it. And then lastly on here, I have some helpful vocab. Here's some transition words, being able to transition smoothly between ideas and paragraphs. Good idea is a good way to get your score up from novice high to intermediate low. Obviously, if we're talking about origins, you're going to have a lot of family. You can describe their family. Here's all sorts of terms for the familia. Here are the most common up here. And then down here, it gets pretty in the weeds. But feel free to use that. And then lastly, I found this set of 16 useful verbs. Using any of these 16, you should be able to communicate pretty much most basic information that you want to be able to communicate. Obviously, there are way more than this out there. But between these 16, you should be in pretty good shape. Obviously, go outside of this list if you need to, but if you're having a hard time getting started, maybe try and start a sentence using one of these. And that's all the info I have on the assignment sheet. So let's go look at what everything, let's go look more closely at the assignments associated with this. So on May 6th, next Friday, your brainstorm storyline and new vocab are due. So that's this other template that's in here. Like I said, on your screen, it'll probably be in the top right corner. We're going to open that. And you'll be able to fill this out. This is just a brainstorming sheet. What do you want their name to be? What do you think their origin is? What are they the god or goddess of? What would you say are their special superhuman powers? What is their appearance? What do they look like? What would you say is their special symbol? Do they have any friends that are gods or goddesses? Like who would be on their side? Who do you think would like them? If you know, like obviously not having friends is also an option. And also, does this deity have any enemies, whether that be another god or goddess or a certain type of thing? Do they have a certain weakness? In terms of the people and integrating kind of like culture into this, who worships this god? What kind of rituals do their followers use? Obviously, you want it to be something that relates to your god or goddess's personality or power. Sorry. And lastly, whom does this god dislike? Why? What kind of punishment do they inflict? Are there certain types of people they don't like? Like, for example, in the Trojan War, we know that Minerva and Juno were very much on the side of the Greeks, and they did not like the Trojans, and vice versa. Venus was on the side of the Trojans and did not like Greeks. So how does that work out in your story? And lastly, anything else? Do you have any other ideas? Below that, you'll see our storyboard. This is just for you to try and brainstorm a general structure for your story. Just break it down to a beginning, middle, and end. Typically, in the beginning, you want to introduce the origin or introduce some type of problem. The middle is just world building or explanation, exploring and encountering that problem. And the end is obviously the conclusion of the resolution of that conflict. And lastly, it says new vocabulary you'll think you'll need to look up. This is if you're thinking about your god or goddess. If you're doing like something like the goddess of public transportation, then maybe you want to look up what like the Neo-Latin word for bus is. So you'd include like the word for bus down here, or you'd include the word bus down here. This is just to kind of give me an idea of how I can help. All right. And so that's the first thing. That's the brainstorming sheet. That's what's due by Friday. The next thing that's due, and I'm going to go back here, is just a Latin rough draft, and this is due by the following week. So you'll see here, I don't have any template for you to write this on. So you're gonna, if you do it on Google Slides, just you can click Add and submit the Google slide or Google Docs. If you're doing it by hand, you're welcome to take pictures and just submit the pictures. I hope they're clear. I'll try and get them on a Google slide or something so they're more readable. But before you turn it in, I want you to look over this self-assessment and you're going to kind of grade yourself. Circle what you think you are up here, or if you're online, highlight the one you think you are up here. And then down here, for everything that you can identify that you have, go over here and put a 1. And for everything you either can't identify if you have, or you don't know how to use it and it's not in the story, then you'll put a 0 over here. And so you'll do that when you submit your rough draft. And then lastly, hopefully you submit your rough draft. I'm able to give you some feedback on it. And that very last step is just submitting your final draft, which is right here, due May 18th. Once again, before you turn this in, you will again complete a self-assessment if you feel like things have changed. Oops, I do not know I did that. Oops. Okay. So that's it. That's the children's book assignment. I hope you guys have fun. I will, and I hope I get things to share. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Message me on It's Learning. A lot of you guys do a great job of that. But like I said, the overall thing here is for you to be creative, have a little fun while practicing the Latin we've gone over. And I think that's pretty much it. I think one thing that I'll need to add is some kind of link to the resources for the different types of verbs and the different grammar things. So I'll try and work on that and get that out to you guys as soon as possible. But in the meantime, I think I'm done. So, valete.